The number one question that I get asked when people want to come do training with me is, what tires should I be running on the bike? More than boots or riding gear or bike should I ride, it's all about tires. Let's start off with putting out some parameters here. I'm talking about training. These are riders who want to come train with me. And that really comes back to a couple of questions before we talk about tires themselves is, what do you expect and what do you want out of that tire while you're doing training? Are you looking for the most traction that gives you the most leeway for making errors without consequence? Or are you looking for the opportunity to have more challenge developing clutch or slip, in which case less traction might be something you're looking for? It also depends on the terrain and the environment. If it's dry out, chances are tires may not be a huge factor in what you're doing. As soon as the weather starts to change, you start to get moisture, or you start to get into very challenging terrain, deep sand, very loose rock, hill climbs, and this sort of terrain features, then all of a sudden it starts to make a big difference. In general, I'm going to tell you, my recommendation is to go with a more aggressive tire, something that gives you more advantage during the learning process. You're not wasting energy picking up your bike, falling down, and instead you're focused on using that energy for learning and skill development. This is what's referred to as a 50-50 tire. If you've heard of the 90-10, 70-30, 50-50, what that is a reference that the manufacturers put on a tire that essentially class it as to its abilities in both a street and a dirt environment. And that's the order it's generally done, is street first and dirt second. So a 90-10, 90% street, 70-30, 90, or 70% street, 50-50 just means that it's about equal street to dirt. Obviously, when you think about that ratio, you're giving up on one side to get the other side. The training that I do, I'm usually recommending a 50-50 or better. And the easiest way to determine this without considering all of the secondary factors, like is it a bias ply versus a radial, what is the depth of the tread, what is the compound made of, but just by looking at the tire, engaging it, is to look at the gap of the tire. And what you're looking at is how much space is between those knobs. And whatever that space is about what you're going to grade the tire. So if you see about 50% equal space to tire contact, that's probably going to be a 50-50 tire. And to kind of prove that point, I did a bunch of printings for quite a few different tires on the market, some really popular ones. All of these prints are going to be up on Tkacs.com/tires. And you'll find all this information with the ratios. This one is actually slightly greater than a 50-50. This is actually 38% tread with 62% being gapped. And the manufacturer actually claims this is a 50-50. If I went just on a gap side, then this would be a 40-60 with the advantage being to the off-road. Turns out the small knobs versus large knobs is definitely a consideration as well when you're thinking about road performance. A tire with smaller knobs like this might look like it's a lower performer when in fact it's often a higher performer off-road. The larger blocks that are often put on adventure tires are so that the tires, the rubber itself doesn't twist and move as much, and the bike can be more stable or feel more stable when it's on pavement, but it does give up the advantage of additional edges and places for that tire to dig into and to grip. And that's just one of the design features we see on that. So to keep things simple, if you look at the contact area versus the gap, that will give you a ratio. And again, the reason I did the prints is because when we look at the full tire, what I'm concerned about is the actual contact or surface area, and that's what I'm measuring. Oh, and let me call this one out by name, because it's a really popular tire now, and it's the most popular 70/30 tire that I get coming to my training, and that's the Tkacs Mission, the Dunlop Tkacs Mission. It's a great tire, but so very often I get relatively new riders who show up with that tire because they were sold that tire saying, well, no, I read the reviews and this is a 50/50 and it's really good and the manufacturer says it's great. The store that installed it said it was awesome. I'm gonna tell you right now, it is not a magic tire. And what happens is when you show up with a tire like that and it rains, you end up in a lot of trouble. So please, if you're gonna go in and you wanna have a performance tire, then buy a tire that's gonna do that. You're not gonna find one that can do everything perfectly. There's always gonna be a compromise involved with that. Again, this is weather dependent. If you're coming out to do an adventure camp with me and everything is nice and it's dry as it usually is, then by all means, something like a Tkacs Mission are gonna do just fine with you. If you're gonna do a challenge class with me, you gotta have a 50/50 or better. That's just a mandate, it's a requirement of mine. Some of the other things to consider, obviously gap is the most visual and the easiest way to select a tire that's gonna work with this. Let me talk about a couple other factors to keep in mind. Is it a bias ply or is it a radial? Now the difference between those is that a bias ply is gonna have the internal cords that wrap all the way around the sidewall and all the way up and around the tire, making it just as stiff all the way through the tire, where a radial tire is gonna be thinner on the sides and it's gonna have more cords in the tread section, which makes it a better performer on the street. It makes it quieter, it conforms better, but it also means that it's losing some of the advantages of a bias ply off-road, which is weight or impact loading and also sidewall protection. So if you have the choice between a radial and a bias ply, I would definitely lean towards the bias ply for off-road use and durability. Depending on the bike you're riding, if you have a very wide rear tire and you can't size it down, you may only have radials as an option. It is okay to mix bias ply and radial tires on a motorcycle. And in fact, many manufacturers, both on adventure bikes and on cruisers, do it pretty regularly. You cannot do it on a car. Don't go do it on your car, your truck, or something else, because at that point it becomes dangerous. But on a motorcycle where it's a single track vehicle, front tire, rear tire separate, mixing bias ply and radials are not a safety issue, and there's definitely advantages to mixing those compounds at different times. But bias ply will give you better off-road durability and overall performance. The size of the tire is going to be based on the rim size. A great example is the bike I'm riding right here. This is the Ducati Desert X, and it comes stock with a 150/70/18 rear tire on a 4.25-inch rim. The BMW, the R1250 and the R1200 GS came with a 170/70/17 on a 4.25-inch rim. What that means is that both of those tires are correctly sized for that rim, but that's the range. You can run from 170 down to a 150 on that rim size. Once you get above or below that, now you're oversized or undersized for the rim. As an example, when I'm running a tire on a 1200 GS or 1250 GS off-road or for doing training, I'll always go to the smallest tire size that fits the rim properly. And the reason is I get better performance out of it because it's a lighter tire. I have less unsprung weight, I have better acceleration, I have better braking, and my suspension works better. The other advantage is I create an elongated traction patch as opposed to a rounder or more oval traction patch, and off-road that has some significant advantages. So the fit of the tire, the size of the tire is definitely something to consider as well. I did mention when I started this video that we have compound, and that's one of the things that we have to consider when purchasing a tire. We can't see that. We have to go to the manufacturers. We kind of have to believe them. But there's always going to be a trade-off. The Motas are very popular. They have a very deep tread. I haven't gotten into the depth of tread yet, but they have a very deep tread and they last a very long time. You spend a lot, but they last a long time. But when it's wet out, you're going to know it. As opposed to like the tire that I'm running on this Ducati right now, the Anarchy Wild from Michelin, which is a very soft compound. It's a very expensive tire as well, but it wears out very, very quickly in comparison to something like the Motas. but it also has a much higher performance on the pavement and performs extremely well off-road. So it's a give and a take, right? You're not going to get longevity and performance equal. You're going to have to shift one way or the other, and that's going to depend on what you want out of the tire and how often you change it and everything else. And that's where we talk about life cycles of tires. You're not just looking at the initial purchase of it. How long does it last? What's it cost to get rid of it? What's the cost of replacement? These are all things you want to consider as well. Again, that's on that website, Tkacs.com/tires, and you'll find more details on that in that article that I put on the website. As far as feel goes, I mentioned large block versus small block. Large blocks, no, first of all, they're all going to be noisy to different degrees. That's just because the way the tire moves and the air in it. Just if you're going to have a knobby tire, that's just what you're gonna have. But you may have a little different feel between the larger blocks and smaller blocks on how it feels on the road, how long it might last on the road, and how it performs off-road. So these are again all these trade-offs that you're going to have as far as tires go. The last thing I want you to consider just in this little short tutorial is price of the tire. Price it, there is going to be a difference between brands. Certainly there's higher end brands, Michelin, Dunlop, Continental, these brands that have been around for a long time, but there's also some very well established and high quality brands that are less known by name, Motaz being a newer one. Midas has been around for a long time, but even tires like Kenda, they've been around for a long time making a lot of tires, but they're not as popular. So they may not necessarily have the same technology in them, potentially. They don't have the same budget for advertising, which is one of the things you're going to be paying for in a higher level tire. What that means is that price may or may not get you performance equal to the extra money that you're spending. So it's something to consider when you're looking at it. When in doubt, I'll always go with a name brand or an established manufacturer, but I'm definitely not going to shy away from others if their tires perform well and the price point fits what I need. Again, for a full rundown on what a bias ply is, a radial, the compounds and all these other factors that I addressed here, even talking about tire pressure, what tire pressure should be run, I'm going to recommend go to the website, Tkacs.com/tires. You'll find the whole article there with lots of pictures. Also, you can email me or leave comments. If you have questions, I'll try to get back to you in a timely fashion. Thanks for watching the video, and I'll see you in class.